Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending on when you're tuning in. Let me know in the comments. What town are you watching this from? And listen, if this story popped up for you, it's because it deserves to be heard. So, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more stories like this one. The sun was already dipping behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple when I decided to head home. That kind of light always reminds me of Mary, my wife, who passed away 3 years ago, taken by a cancer no one could explain. She loved watching the sunset from the porch with a hot coffee in her hand and that smile that still visits me in my dreams. I'd spent the whole day working the cornfields, hauling feed sacks and checking the fences that the cattle kept knocking down. My hands were calloused, my back ached, like it always did after a day in the hot sun, but that's what kept me going. The work, the routine, the obligation to keep moving forward, even when my heart felt like it had stopped in time with her. Here in rural Oklahoma, nestled between Tulsa and Oklahoma City, the land has a way of sticking to you, not just on the soles of your boots or under your fingernails, but in your soul. Red dust that becomes a part of you, that you breathe in, that lingers in the taste in your mouth. The scent of dry grass that clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin, mixed with the sweet and heavy smell of pecan blossoms when they're in season. It's like the land knows you belong to it, not the other way around. The ranch was about 10 miles from the nearest town, Guthrie, which wasn't much to look at, maybe 5,000 folks, a church, 2 drugstores, a gas station, and not a whole lot else. My spread wasn't anything impressive either. 200 acres of good land, a few head of Angus cattle, corn, beans, and a garden that Mary tended with so much love that the plants seemed to grow just from hearing her voice. Now without her, the plants grew a little crooked, missing the care that only she knew how to give. I tried, watering them on time, pulling the weeds, but my hands were made for other work. Big, rough hands that knew how to handle fences and cattle, but trembled when trying to tie tomato plants to their stakes. The house felt her absence too. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a kitchen with a wood-burning stove that she insisted on keeping even after we had electric. "Food cooked on a wood stove just tastes different, John," she'd say. And she was right, as she always was. Now I cooked on the electric one, more out of laziness than necessity, and the food came out bland, without any soul. Usually, I'd take the main road back, wider and safer, passing through town, saying hi to old Tony at the bar, Mrs. Peterson at the pharmacy, folks I'd known since I was a kid. But that day, I was running late, real late. Still had to gather the animals and close up the chicken coop before dark. Otherwise, that fox that had been prowling around the property would have a feast with my hens. The weather was turning too. Heavy clouds building on the horizon, the kind that carry a downpour, the kind that fill the creeks and flood the dirt roads. I knew that a storm in Oklahoma didn't forgive those caught in its path. I'd seen folks spend the whole night stuck in their cars because the water washed out the bridge, or because the mud turned into soap, and no amount of traction could help. I parked my old pickup truck by the edge of the property, where the trail through the woods began. A 1985 Ford F-150, white, or what used to be white, with over 300,000 miles on it. I inherited it from my dad, along with the land, and it never let me down. Engine rumbling, stiff suspension that felt every rock on the road, but reliable as an old dog. I looked at the trail through the woods and hesitated. Everyone in the area knew that trail. It was shorter, yeah, cut off about 5 miles from the normal route. But it had a bad reputation, real bad. The old-timers told stories of strange creatures, of folks who went in normal and came out different, with glazed eyes and talking nonsense. My dad, God rest his soul, always said, "John, there are places we shouldn't tread, especially at night. The woods know when we're not welcome, and they have ways of showing it." But standing there watching the sky darken and thinking about the loose animals, the approaching rain, the fox waiting for its chance, I decided to risk it. What trouble could happen? I knew those lands like the back of my hand. I was born and raised there, just like my dad and my grandpa before him. 3 generations treading the same land, breathing the same air, drinking water from the same well. I entered the trail slowly, first gear, feeling every hole and every rock. The truck swayed like a boat in rough seas, but it was used to it. 16 years on the road, and it still took me where I needed to go. The engine hummed contentedly, as if it knew the way by heart too. The trees gradually closed in on both sides, forming a green and shadowy tunnel that got darker with every yard. Ancient oaks, their trunks thick as a giant's embrace. Redbuds that had just finished blooming, petals scattered on the ground making a colorful carpet. Pecan trees laden with nuts, low branches scraping against the roof of the truck. The sound of the engine echoed differently in there, more muffled, as if the woods swallowed the sounds and transformed them into something else. The birds, which made a racket during the day, were now quiet. A heavy silence that clung to the skin. That's when I started hearing things. First, the crickets, normal for that time of day, then came other sounds. Branches breaking in the distance, leaves rustling without any wind, a strong smell in the air that I couldn't identify. A mix of wet earth, of animal, of something sweet and sickening like overripe fruit. I stopped the truck and turned off the engine. The silence that followed wasn't real silence. It was full of small noises, whispers, movements that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It felt like the whole forest was watching me, waiting for something. The shadows moved, even without wind, and I started to understand why my dad didn't like that place. I turned the engine back on and accelerated a little, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. But the trail seemed to have gotten narrower, or maybe it was just my imagination. The trees on both sides leaned over the path, low branches scraping against the windshield, making a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. About 200 yards ahead, something in the middle of the trail made me slam on the brakes. It wasn't a fallen branch or a rock. It was a person, a young woman lying on her side on the dirt ground, her clothes torn, her brown hair spread around her face like a dark halo, motionless as the dead. My first thought was that she was dead. The second was that I should turn around and leave, call the cops, let trained people handle this. Not because I didn't want to help, but because something about the whole scene wasn't right. A woman alone in the woods, at the end of the day, far from any busy road. But then she moved, just a little, like someone trying to wake up from a heavy dream, her hand clenching slowly, her fingers scratching at the dirt. I got out of the truck slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The strange smell became more intense, and that's when I saw them. 10, maybe 12 big monkeys surrounding the young woman. Howler monkeys, long dark fur, the size of big dogs, some even bigger. They moved in a circle around her, screaming with that guttural voice that echoed through the whole forest, showing their yellowed teeth, some beating their chests as if they were marking territory or performing some ritual I didn't understand. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. The animals seemed nervous, agitated, but they weren't attacking. It was like they were protecting or testing. I couldn't figure out what was happening. One of them, bigger than the others, with a scar that cut across his face from one ear to his mouth, stayed closer to her head, sniffing, grunting softly, like a guard dog. The young woman moved again, tried to lift her head, and all the monkeys immediately went on alert. The noise they made echoed through the whole forest, a chorus of screams and roars that made my hair stand on end and made birds I didn't even know were there fly away in a panic. I stood there for a few seconds that felt like hours, trying to understand the situation. My dad always said that wild animals don't attack without a reason. Either they're scared, or they're protecting something, or they're hungry, or they're sick. But those animals seemed confused, like they didn't know exactly what to do with that strange presence in their territory. The young woman tried to prop herself up on her elbow and let out a soft groan of pain. The sound made the biggest of the monkeys, the one with the scar, take 2 steps in her direction, but then stop suddenly, as if something was preventing him from getting closer. He stood there, swaying his body back and forth, grunting, clearly agitated. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't just hurt, she was pregnant, very pregnant. The rounded belly, even with the torn and dirty clothes covered in dirt and leaves, was impossible to miss. And from her movements, from the position she was lying in, it seemed like the pregnancy was well advanced. Very advanced. 8, 9 months maybe. My blood froze. A pregnant woman, alone in the woods, surrounded by wild animals, far from any medical help. If something happened there, I wouldn't even know where to start. Mary and I never had children. She got pregnant once many years ago, but lost it in the 3rd month. After that, we couldn't anymore, and the subject became a wound that neither of us liked to touch. But I couldn't just stand there watching. I went back to the truck slowly, without sudden movements, trying not to attract the animal's attention. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. I grabbed a piece of rope that I always carried in the truck bed, a flashlight from the glove compartment, and the knife for cutting rope that was stuck to the dashboard with duct tape. They weren't great weapons against 12 angry monkeys, but it was all I had. When I came back, the situation had changed completely. The young woman was sitting up, leaning against the trunk of an oak tree, with both hands holding her belly. Her eyes were open now, big, blue like the morning sky, but full of fear and confusion. And the monkeys had changed formation. Now they were all facing me in a semicircle, staring at me as if I were the intruder, which maybe I was. She saw me and tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out, almost inaudible. "Help. It's okay," I said softly, even knowing that she could barely hear me over the distance and the noise the animals were making. "I'm going to get you out of there." The problem was how. The animals didn't seem willing to get out of the way just because I asked nicely. The one with the scar, who was clearly the leader, took a step in my direction and showed his teeth in a threatening grimace. The others joined in, screaming and beating their own chests. I remembered the stories my grandpa told about how to scare off angry animals. "Make noise, John. Wild animals respect whoever makes more noise than they do. But you have to be confident without fear. They can smell fear." I picked up 2 fist-sized rocks that I found on the ground and started banging them together, hard, making a dry sound that echoed through the woods. The noise was loud, metallic, unnatural for those parts. The monkeys stopped moving and looked at me with curiosity. The leader with the scar tilted his head to the side, like a dog when it hears a strange sound. Some of the smaller ones even took a step back. I banged the rocks even harder and shouted with all the voice I had in my chest, "Get out of here, get lost, go on." It worked partially. 2 of the smaller ones retreated a few yards, clearly bothered by the noise, but the big one kept coming, and now I could see the real size of that animal. He must have weighed about 150 pounds, arms as thick as my thighs, hands that looked like they could break a thick branch without effort. The teeth, when he opened his mouth, were yellowed but sharp, made for tearing apart hard fruits and, if necessary, flesh. The young woman groaned again, louder this time, and brought her hands to her belly more forcefully. I saw her contract, her face twist in pain. That's when I understood, with a pang in my heart that almost made me fall to the ground. She wasn't just hurt, she was in labor. The baby was going to be born there in the middle of the woods, surrounded by wild animals, far from any medical help. And I, who knew nothing about childbirth, was going to have to figure something out. There was no time to be scared. The situation was too serious for me to stand there thinking about the problems. I advanced in the direction of the monkeys, banging the rocks and shouting as loud as I could, waving my arms like a madman. Some of them fled immediately, startled by that show of aggression, but 3 remained, including the big one with the scar. They formed a line between me and the young woman, screaming back as if they were challenging me to a duel. The leader slammed the ground with both hands and took 2 more steps forward. Now he was less than 10 yards from me, and I could see every detail of the animal. The old scar cutting across his face, the small and intelligent eyes, the powerful musculature under the fur. If he decided to attack me, I wouldn't stand a chance. That's when I remembered the truck's horn. I retreated slowly, always facing the animals, until I reached the car. I turned on the engine and started honking without stopping. The loud and sharp sound echoed through the woods like a fire alarm, a totally artificial noise in that wild environment. The monkeys, who probably had never heard anything like it in their lives, went into total panic. They screamed, jumped, trampled each other, trying to flee. The leader resisted for a few seconds, clearly confused, but when I revved the engine and lurched in his direction, honking without stopping, even he gave up. In less than 2 minutes, they had all disappeared into the dense vegetation, leaving only the echo of their screams fading in the distance. The silence that followed the horn dying out was almost deafening. All I could hear was the truck engine running and the sound of my own breathing, heavy as if I had run a mile. I turned off the car and ran to the young woman. She was pale as a dish rag, sweating cold despite the heat, breathing short and fast. The blue eyes stared at me with a mixture of relief and terror, as if she couldn't believe that someone had shown up to help her. "Please," she whispered, her voice so low I had to kneel close to her to hear. "Don't leave me here." "I won't," I replied, already thinking about how I was going to carry her to the truck without hurting her any more than she already was. "What's your name?" "Helena," she managed to say between ragged breaths. "Helena Davis." "I'm John Baptiste." I tried to make my voice sound calmer than I felt. "Helena, I need you to tell me, how long do you think it'll be before the baby comes?" She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she opened them again, I saw real panic stamped on them. "I don't know," she moaned, her voice trembling. "The pain started early this morning, but now they're really bad, really close together." I looked around, trying to assess my options. The sky was almost dark now, and the first fat raindrops started to fall, making noise in the leaves. If we stayed there, or if I tried to take her down that pothole-filled road to town, the baby could be born in the middle of the trail without any sanitation or safety. But at the ranch, I had a generator that kept the lights on, clean water from the well, some basic first aid stuff that Mary always made sure to keep in the house, and Mrs. Gable, the closest neighbor who lived about 2 miles away, had been a midwife her whole life before she retired. If I could just get to the phone. "Helena, listen carefully," I said, kneeling close to her and holding one of her hands, which was cold despite the heat. "My ranch is about a mile from here. There's light, there's a phone, I can call for help, but I need to carry you to the truck, and it's going to hurt a bit. Can you handle that?" She nodded, biting her lower lip so hard it turned white. "But if the baby comes along the way..." "We'll figure it out," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "We're going to get through this together, Helena." When I picked her up, she was lighter than I expected, but the big belly and her condition made everything more complicated. She must have been in her early 20s, petite, skinny even for a pregnant woman. With every step I took toward the truck, she held onto my neck and moaned softly, trying not to make a sound. "Sorry," she murmured, her mouth close to my ear. "Sorry for causing you trouble, sir." "You're not causing any trouble," I replied, even though I could feel my arms shaking from the effort and the tension. "And you don't have to call me sir, just John." I managed to get her into the passenger seat carefully, adjusted the seatbelt under her belly, which was big and hard like a watermelon, and covered her with an old leather jacket that I always kept in the truck. The rain was getting stronger, fat drops hitting the windshield and the hood. "Hold on tight," I muttered, turning on the engine and shifting into first. "I'll try to go slow, but if it gets too bad, let me know." I started driving as carefully as possible, trying to avoid the bigger holes and the loose rocks. But the trail was treacherous even in dry weather. With the rain starting, it was getting slippery. With every jolt, even the small ones, Helena moaned and pressed her belly with both hands. The contractions were getting more frequent. I didn't know anything about childbirth, but even I could tell that the situation was getting critical. "How many babies have you had?" I asked, trying to distract her and at the same time get a better understanding of the situation. "None," she replied through clenched teeth. "This is my first." That complicated everything even more. First labors usually took longer from what I'd heard, but they could also be more complicated. "And the baby's father?" The question came out without me thinking, and I immediately regretted it. It wasn't the time or place for curiosity. She was quiet for a while, just the sound of the rain on the roof and the rumble of the engine filling the silence. When she finally answered, her voice was different, harder. "There isn't a father." "Sorry, I shouldn't have asked." "No, it's okay." She took a deep breath, let it out slowly. "It's complicated, really complicated." That's when she screamed. A loud scream of real pain that cut through the air of the cabin like a knife and made my heart race. I stopped the truck immediately, the wheels skidding a little in the dirt that was turning to mud. "What is it? What's happening?" She was sweating cold now, breathing too fast, her eyes wide with genuine panic. I don't think I'm going to make it to the ranch," she whispered, her voice trembling. And that's when I realized the seat where she was sitting was wet. It wasn't just sweat. Her water had broken. The baby was going to be born there, in my old pickup truck, in the middle of the woods, in the rain, with only a farmer who didn't know anything about childbirth to help. I felt the world spin around me. "Breathe, Helena, breathe slowly." I said that more to calm myself down than to help her. My voice came out shaky, and I realized that my hands were trembling so much that I could barely hold the steering wheel. I turned off the engine and turned on the interior light of the cabin. The weak, yellowish light showed her face, contorted with pain and fear. I can't have the baby here," she whispered between one contraction and another. "This isn't a place. There's no doctor." "Listen," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "My mother had 6 kids at home, with a midwife. My grandmother had 9, some even alone. Women were made for this, Helena. You can do it." A lie. I had no idea if she could. I had no idea about anything. But something inside me knew that she needed to hear that, needed to believe that everything was going to be okay. The rain increased in intensity, hitting the roof of the truck like small stones. The noise was deafening, but at least it muffled her screams. I looked around, trying to think of what to do. We were in the middle of nowhere, about half a mile from the ranch, but half a mile in the mud and the dark, carrying a woman in labor, was like half a century. "John," her voice brought me back to reality. "It's coming. The baby's coming now." The panic I felt in that moment was different from anything I'd ever experienced in my life. It wasn't fear of wild animals, of an accident, of losing money. It was the pure terror of having a human life in my hands and not knowing what to do with it. How much time between contractions? I don't know. Not much. Very little. I took a deep breath. I had to make a quick decision. Either I tried to get to the ranch, risking the baby being born along the way, or I stopped right there and faced the situation. The rain was turning the trail into a mud pit, and if the truck got stuck, we'd be in an even worse situation. "Let's do the following," I decided. "I'll try to get to that big tree up ahead. Under it, the rain doesn't hit as much. If I can, we'll stop there. If I can't, we'll stop wherever we can." I turned on the engine again and shifted into first. The truck spun, the wheels turning uselessly in the mud, but then it caught traction and moved forward slowly. Every yard was a victory. Helena clung to the dashboard and moaned with every jolt, but she was holding on tight. I managed to get under a huge oak tree with a wide canopy that protected a good patch of ground. I turned off the engine and looked at her. "How are you doing?" "Hurting a lot," she managed to say. "And I'm scared." "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But we're going to figure it out." I got out in the rain and ran to the truck bed. I always carried some basic things: plastic tarp, ropes, tools, an old blanket for emergencies. I grabbed everything that could be useful and went back to the cab, soaked. "I'm going to try to make a more comfortable place in the truck bed," I explained. "There's more space there, and I can spread the tarp to protect from the rain." "I can't move," she moaned. "It hurts too much." "I'll carry you." I stretched the tarp in the truck bed, tying the ends to the sides. It wasn't much, but it created a dry and relatively protected space. I spread the blanket on top and went back to get Helena. When I picked her up this time, she was trembling, not from cold, but from pain and fear. Her small body vibrated with every contraction, and I felt like I was carrying something very fragile that could break at any moment. "Everything's going to be okay," I whispered in her ear as I walked to the truck bed. "Everything's going to be okay, Helena." She didn't answer, just clung to my neck more tightly. I managed to settle her in the truck bed, with her back resting against the cab of the truck and her legs stretched out. The yellowish light from the headlights reflected in the tarp created a strange, surreal atmosphere. It felt like we were in a bubble, isolated from the world. "I need to see how things are," I said, trying to sound medical, professional. "Do you mind?" She nodded, biting her lip. I didn't know anything about childbirth, but I'd seen cows give birth, mares, sows. The basics had to be similar, right? The baby came, you helped, done. Simple as that. It wasn't that simple. When I looked, I saw the baby's head appearing, a small head, covered in dark, wet hair. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. "Helena, I can see the baby's head," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "On the next contraction, you're going to push, okay?" "I don't know how to push," she cried. "I've never done this." "No one does the first time. You'll feel when it's time." The next contraction came stronger than the others. Helena screamed, a scream that cut through the night and made even the rain seem weaker. I saw more of the head appear. It's coming along great." But then something went wrong. The baby stopped coming out. The head was out, but the rest of the body wasn't coming. Helena pushed, screamed, writhed, but nothing happened. "Why did it stop?" she asked, panting, her eyes wide with panic. Why did the baby stop? I didn't know how to answer. I remembered once seeing a cow with a similar problem. My dad had to help, pull carefully. But a cow wasn't a person. A cow wasn't going to die of pain, wasn't going to bleed to death. "The baby's stuck," I whispered more to myself. "Stuck how?" Helena propped herself up on her elbows, trying to get up. "Do something." "Calm down. Let me think." But there wasn't time to think. With every second that passed, the baby spent more time without breathing properly, and Helena was getting paler, losing strength. I remembered my dad's words. "Sometimes you have to trust your gut, John. When you don't know what to do what your heart tells you." I placed my hands on both sides of the baby's head with all the care in the world, and on the next contraction, I pulled slowly, very slowly, as if I was holding something made of glass. First came one shoulder, then the other. And then, in a quick and slippery movement, the baby came out whole, small and wet, directly into my hands. It didn't cry. It stayed there, quiet, purplish, without moving. "Why isn't it crying?" Helena asked, her voice desperate. "Why isn't my baby crying?" My heart stopped. The baby was too limp, too quiet. I turned it upside down and gave it a few light pats on the back, like I'd seen done in the movies. Nothing. I tried again, harder. Nothing. "Do something!" Helena screamed. "Please." That's when I remembered something my mother told me about when my youngest brother was born. He also didn't cry at first, and the midwife cleaned his mouth with her finger, took out what was preventing him from breathing. I put the baby in my arms and very carefully opened the small mouth with my pinky finger. There was something there, a kind of transparent goo. I cleaned it as best I could, trying not to hurt her. And then, like a miracle, the baby let out a weak whimper. Then another, stronger, and then she cried for real, loud, complaining about life, about the cold, about the strange world where she had just arrived. "She's crying," I whispered, not believing it. "Helena, your baby is crying." She broke down crying too, from relief, from happiness, from exhaustion. I reached out and placed the baby on her chest, still attached by the umbilical cord. "Is it a boy or a girl?" she asked, her voice choked up. I looked. In the rush and the despair, I hadn't even noticed. "It's a girl," I said, smiling for the first time in hours. "A small and feisty girl." Helena kissed her daughter's head, who had stopped crying and was now looking around with curiosity. Her little eyes were dark, smart, as if she was already trying to figure out where she had arrived. "What am I going to call you?" Helena murmured to her daughter. "You need a pretty name, a strong name." "Hope," I said without thinking. "How about Hope?" Helena looked at me, then at her daughter and smiled. "Hope." She repeated the name slowly, savoring it. "It's a pretty name, a name that fits her." The rain was still falling hard, but there under the tarp, in the middle of the woods, in that strange and magical moment, it felt like we were in the safest place in the world. I sitting on one side of the truck bed, Helena lying down with her daughter on her chest, and little Hope discovering the world. "John," Helena said softly after a while, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me in the woods, for bringing me here, for helping her to be born." I didn't know what to say. I stood there looking at the two of them, mother and daughter, and feeling a strange thing in my chest, a mixture of happiness, of pride, of fear of what was going to happen now. Because the baby had been born, she was fine, she was crying and moving. But we were still in the middle of nowhere, without adequate medical conditions, without knowing if Helena was really okay. And more importantly, I still didn't know who Helena really was, where she had come from, why she was alone in the woods. But those questions could wait. For now it was enough that the three of us were alive and well. For now it was enough the miracle of having a new life in the world, born in my hands, under an old tarp, in the middle of a storm. For now it was enough to know that for the first time in 3 years I had done something that really mattered. Chapter 4. The secrets that the land holds. The rain lessened after about 2 hours, but I didn't want to risk moving Helena and the baby in the dark. We stayed there in the truck bed until the first light of day appeared between the trees. Throughout the entire night, I stayed awake, watching over them, listening to little Hope's breathing, checking if Helena didn't have a fever. When the sky cleared a little, I finally managed to take them both home. The ranch seemed different when we arrived, as if it had grown, become more important. The simple house with 3 rooms and a porch was now going to house 3 people instead of 1. The 3 years of loneliness were about to give way to voices, to a baby's cries, to life actually happening. I prepared the guest room, which was really just a storage room where I kept tools and feed sacks as best I could. I spread clean sheets on the bed, put out a basin with warm water, some towels that Mary had embroidered and never used. Helena could barely walk. The labor had taken all her strength, and she leaned on me to take each step. Little Hope slept wrapped in a blanket, quiet as if she knew she needed to save energy. "John," Helena whispered when I laid her on the bed, "I need to tell you something." "Not now," I said, adjusting the pillow behind her head. "Now you need to rest." "No, it has to be now." Her blue eyes stared at me with a seriousness that scared me, because when you know, you might not want us to stay here anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed holding Hope in my arms. The baby opened her little eyes and looked at me curiously, as if she was studying me. "You can talk." Helena took a deep breath, like someone preparing to jump from a high place. "My real name is Helena Calhoun. My stepfather is Colonel Robert Calhoun." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Everyone in the area knew Colonel Calhoun, rich, powerful rancher, owner of land that stretched as far as the eye could see, influential politician, a man who solved problems with money or force depending on the situation, and he had a reputation for being cruel to those who crossed him. Calhoun, I repeated, feeling my mouth go dry. The one with the ranches near Tulsa. The same one. Helena closed her eyes. He killed my mother. The world stopped around me. What do you mean, killed? She wanted to leave him. She found out that he was stealing land from small ranchers, forging documents, threatening people. My mother was a lawyer. She wanted to report him. Her voice got lower, sadder. One morning she left to go to town and never came back. They said it was an accident on the road, that the car rolled over. But I know it was him. Why are you so sure? Because the night before I heard him on the phone, talking to someone about solving Marlene's problem. That was my mother's name. He said he couldn't let her open her mouth, that she would ruin everything he had built. I felt a chill run down my spine. If it was true, I was sheltering the stepdaughter of a dangerous man, very dangerous. And the baby? I asked, looking at Hope. Who's the father? Helena closed her eyes tightly, and I saw tears running down her face. There isn't a father. There's a rapist. The word hung in the air of the room like a curse. Helena, it was him. It was the Colonel. She opened her eyes and looked at me. It started when I turned 15. My mother worked a lot, came home late. He said it was my fault, that I provoked him, that I wanted it. For 3 years, John, 3 years of putting up with that. The anger I felt in that moment was different from anything I had ever felt in my life. A pure, hot anger that made my hands tremble with the desire to break something. After my mother died, it got even worse. He said that now I was completely his, that there was no one to protect me. And when he found out I was pregnant, she stopped, swallowed hard. He said he was going to kill me, that he would say it was an accident, like he did with my mother. Is that why he left you in the woods? He didn't leave me. He took me to kill me. Helena held my hand tightly. He knows that howler monkeys attack people during mating season. He left me there knowing that the animals would do his dirty work for him. I looked at little Hope, sleeping peacefully in my arms, unaware that she had been born from a terrible violence, daughter of a monster, but also daughter of a brave woman who had endured years of horror and still had the strength to be a mother. Why didn't you report him? To who? Helena gave a bitter laugh. He knows everyone in the area. Sheriffs, judges, prosecutors, half of them owe him money, the other half are afraid. Who was going to believe the word of a girl against that of a respected colonel? She was right. In the countryside, colonels like Robert Calhoun were almost untouchable. Money, power, and influence created a protection that few things could pierce. And now? I asked. What do you want to do now? I don't know. She looked at her daughter. I just know that I can't go back there, and that I don't want her to grow up knowing who her father is. Then stay here. The words came out of my mouth before I even thought about them, but when I said them, I knew that's what I wanted. John, you don't understand. If he finds out where I am, he won't find out. I got up, walked to the window and looked out. My land, my piece of the world. Here you're safe. You don't know me well enough. You might regret it. Maybe. But everyone deserves a second chance. And that girl, I looked at Hope, deserves to grow up far from the evil that brought her into the world. Helena was quiet for a while, just looking at me. Then she whispered, "Why are you doing this?" The question caught me off guard. Why was I? Out of pity? Out of loneliness? Out of knowing what it was like to lose someone you love? I don't know, I replied, and it was true. Maybe because when I saw you in the woods, I remembered my Mary in her last days. Fragile, needing care, depending on someone not to give up on everything. Was she very sick? Cancer. She fought for 1.5 years. I felt my voice choke up. In the end, she was small like you, weighed almost nothing, but she never lost hope. She said that God had better plans for her, that she was going to a place where there was no pain. Did you have children? We tried a lot. She got pregnant once but lost it early. Then we couldn't anymore. I looked at Hope. Maybe that's why God put you in my path. Helena smiled for the first time since I found her, a small, tired but genuine smile. John, if we stay here, it can't be out of charity. I'll work. I'll help with whatever I can. I don't want to be a dead weight. Agreed. And if the Colonel shows up, if he shows up, we'll deal with it. My voice came out firmer than I felt. A man who hits a woman and does violence to a child is a coward. Cowards are afraid of real men. It was baloney, I knew. Colonel Calhoun wasn't just a violent man. He was a violent man with money and power. If he wanted to harm us, he had 1,000 ways to do it without dirtying his own hands. But at that moment, looking at Helena and Hope, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the feeling that my life had a purpose again. It wasn't just waking up, taking care of the animals, working the land and sleeping. It was protecting, caring for, making a difference in someone's life. Rest now, I said, taking Hope in my arms. I'll see if I can get her to take some milk. She breastfeeds, Helena said, but if you have formula, you can give it to her too. She must be hungry. I spent the rest of the morning taking care of the two of them. I warmed milk, helped Helena breastfeed, changed the makeshift diapers that I made with dish towels. It was work I'd never done in my life, but I discovered that it wasn't that difficult. It just needed patience and affection. In the afternoon, when Helena was sleeping and Hope too, I went out to take care of the animals, the normal routine of the ranch. But everything seemed different now. The chickens scratching in the yard, the cows ruminating in the shade, the sound of the wind in the corn leaves, everything had gained a new meaning. That's when I heard the sound of the car, a powerful engine, different from the normal cars in the area. I stopped what I was doing and looked in the direction of the road. A black pickup truck, brand new, was coming slowly down the trail that led to the house. My blood ran cold. I didn't recognize the car, but I recognized the type. Car of rich people, of powerful people, of people who didn't come to my ranch unless it was something serious. The truck stopped in front of the house. Two men got out. One was tall, thin, about 50 years old, dressed in a suit even in the heat of Oklahoma, sunglasses, well-combed gray hair. The other was younger, strong, with the face of someone who solved problems with their fists. I didn't need anyone to introduce me to know who the first one was. Colonel Robert Calhoun had come to get his stepdaughter, and I was in the middle of a war that I didn't even know existed. I walked towards the two men trying to appear calm, but I felt my heart beating so hard that I was sure they could hear it. I wiped my dirty hands on my pants and stopped about 10 feet away. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice coming out firmer than I expected. The colonel took off his sunglasses and studied me with small, cold eyes like a snake's. He was older than he looked from afar, maybe 60 years old, but he was well preserved. Expensive clothes, gold watch, shoes that cost more than my salary for a year. The type of man who was used to being obeyed without question. John Baptiste Oliveira? His voice was deep, polite, but with a tone of authority that made you want to lower your head. "Yes, sir. Colonel Robert Calhoun." He extended his hand, and when I shook it, I realized that it was firm, strong. "I believe you found something that belongs to me." The anger rose in my throat like bile. Something that belongs to me. Helena wasn't a thing, she was a person. A person who had suffered at the hands of that man for years. "I didn't find anything that's yours, Colonel." He smiled, but it was a smile without joy, without warmth. The type of smile that appears before something bad happens. "Let's stop playing games, John. Can I call you John?" He didn't wait for an answer. "My stepdaughter, Helena, disappeared 2 days ago. We're very worried about her. The girl isn't right in the head, you know how it is. Sometimes she's normal, sometimes she makes up stories, says things that don't exist. I don't know what girl you're talking about." The younger man, the henchman, took a step towards me. He was big, broad shoulders, hands the size of frying pans. At his waist, under his shirt, I could see the bulge of a gun. "Mark," the colonel said softly, and the man stopped where he was. "Easy. John's a good guy, I'm sure. He's just confused." He walked a few steps, looking around the property as if he was assessing the value of everything. "Nice ranch. Small, but well kept. I heard you lost your wife a few years ago. Cancer, wasn't it?" The mention of Mary hit me like a slap. How did he know about her? And why was he talking about it now? It was. Sad thing. Young woman, full of life. He shook his head, pretending to grieve. "I bet the medical expenses were heavy. Hospital, medicine, treatment. Must have cost a fortune." "What are you getting at?" "Nowhere. Just talking." He stopped in front of me again. "What I mean is that I know how difficult it is to maintain a property alone, especially after a loss like that. Debts accumulate, things get difficult." It was true. Mary's treatment had consumed almost all our savings. I still owed the bank, the pharmacies, even the vet, but it wasn't his business. "I'll be direct, John." His voice got harder. "I know my stepdaughter is here. I have reliable information. And I also know that she made up a far-fetched story about me, probably said that I'm a monster, that I hurt her. The girl suffers from severe mental problems, John. She's been hospitalized twice for psychotic episodes." "You're lying." "I'm lying?" He laughed, but it was a laugh without humor. "I have the medical reports if you want to see them. Helena has a history of making up stories, of accusing innocent people of terrible things. That's why we take such good care of her, keep her protected, away from situations that might worsen her condition." Doubt began to gnaw at my mind like rust. What if he was right? What if Helena really was mentally ill? What if I was protecting someone who had invented a terrible story about an innocent man? But then I remembered her eyes, the real fear when she told about the abuses, the despair when she said he had killed her mother. It wasn't madness. It was true terror. "Even if that were true," I said, "she's not here." "John," his voice got even lower, more dangerous, "don't force me to be unpleasant. I'm a businessman. I prefer to resolve things through conversation. But if I need to use other methods..." That's when I heard the crying. Softly, almost inaudible, but unmistakable. The crying of a newborn baby coming from the house. The colonel's eyes lit up like those of a hunter who had just seen his prey. "What's that crying, John?" My mind raced, trying to invent an excuse. Cat, dog, anything that wasn't the truth. I didn't hear anything. The crying came again, louder this time. Hope was waking up and was hungry. "Interesting." The colonel smiled, that cold smile again. "As far as I know, you don't have children or a wife. Whose baby is that, John?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The truth was there, obvious as the midday sun. "Mark," the colonel said without taking his eyes off me, "go take a look in the house." "You're not going to." I put myself in front of the henchman. "This is my property. No one comes in here without a warrant." "A warrant?" The colonel laughed. "John, you don't understand who you're messing with. I don't need a warrant. I know the sheriff, the prosecutor, the judge. I can get any paper I want in 2 hours." "Then go get it." The henchman pushed me hard, and I almost fell. But I didn't move from in front of the door. "Get out of the way, hillbilly," he snarled. "Mark!" The colonel raised his hand. "Easy. John will understand the situation." He walked up to me and stopped close, so close that I could smell the expensive perfume and the cigarette. "Listen carefully, John Baptiste. I can ruin your life in an afternoon. One word from me at the bank and your loans are due tomorrow. One call to the city hall and your property is without licenses, without water, without power. Another call to the buyers of your production and you don't sell a single bag of corn in the area." His voice was low, calm, but each word fell like a stone in my stomach. "Or I can do the opposite. I can pay off your debts, buy your harvest for an excellent price, even expand your property if you want. All you need to do is be reasonable. What do you want?" "I want my stepdaughter back." And I wanted to understand that making up stories about me won't lead to anything but problems for everyone. That's when Helena appeared at the door, pale, trembling, still weak from childbirth, but standing. She held Hope in her arms, wrapped in the blanket. Her blue eyes were full of terror, but also of a courage that impressed me. "I didn't make anything up, Robert," she said, her voice sounding firmer than her body looked. "And you know that." The Colonel's face transformed completely. The mask of the polite man fell off, and what appeared underneath was ugly. Very ugly. "Helena," his voice was different now, low and threatening. "What a joy to see you well. We were worried." "I'm sure you were. And I see you had the baby." His eyes fixed on Hope. "My granddaughter. How lovely." "She's not your granddaughter." Helena squeezed her daughter against her chest. "She never will be." "Helena, honey, you're confused again. Of course, she's my granddaughter." He took a step towards her. "And I think it's best if we go home. You need proper medical care, and the baby too." "I'm not going back." "Yes, you are." His voice turned hard as steel. "Because if you don't come back, I'll ruin your little friend's life here, and then I'll ruin yours too. And you know what's going to happen to the baby?" Helena turned white as paper. "She'll grow up with me. She'll be raised by me. And when she turns 15, well, you know how I like to educate my girls." But what I felt in that moment was beyond anger. It was something primitive, animal, that came from a deep place that I didn't even know existed. I lunged towards the Colonel with the desire to break his neck with my own hands. The henchman stopped me before I got close. He was really strong, immobilized me without difficulty. "John, no!" Helena screamed. "What a temper," the Colonel said, adjusting his shirt. "I see my stepdaughter found herself a brave defender. Too bad that courage without intelligence is just a quick way to die." He made a signal, and the henchman released me, but stayed close. "Last chance, Helena. Either you come with me willingly, or I take you both for a ride in the woods. And only one of you comes back." Helena looked at me, then at her daughter, then at him. I saw the struggle happening in her eyes, the fear, the despair, the desire to protect her daughter against the will to save herself. "All right," she whispered. "I'll go back." "No," I shouted. "Helena, don't do it." "I have to, John." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "It's the only way to protect you both." "Wise decision," the Colonel said. "Mark, get the girls' things." That's when I heard the noise. Engines. Several engines coming towards the ranch. The Colonel frowned, clearly surprised. It wasn't part of his plan. 3 cars came up the trail. 2 cars from the state police and a pickup truck that I recognized. It was Sheriff Buckley's, an honest man I'd known since I was a kid. The cars stopped and 6 men got out. 5 cops and the sheriff. "Colonel Calhoun," the sheriff said, his voice formal but firm. "You're under arrest." The Colonel's face turned into a mask of disbelief. "Arrested? For what reason?" "Rape, unlawful imprisonment, first-degree murder, and attempted murder." "This is ridiculous. Who made these accusations?" The sheriff looked at Helena, then at me. "The district attorney's office, based on an anonymous complaint that arrived yesterday, and with documentary evidence that was delivered this morning." "What evidence?" "That's when I saw a woman coming out from behind one of the police cars. Older, about 40 years old, grey hair, simple but clean clothes. I knew her by sight. It was Connie, the Colonel's former housekeeper." "Connie?" The Colonel looked like he had seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "What I should have done a long time ago," she replied, her voice firm. "Telling the truth." She turned to the sheriff. "I have the recordings of the threats he made against Helena's mother. I have pictures of the bruises she would come home with, and I have the testimony of 3 other women who he abused over the years." The world stopped around me. "Connie," The colonel tried, his voice already without the authority of before. "You don't know what you're doing. I can give you money, lots of money. Money doesn't pay for the guilt I've been carrying for years for having stayed silent," she replied. "Money doesn't bring Marlene back. It doesn't undo what you did to this girl." Two cops approached the colonel with handcuffs. "Robert Calhoun, you have the right to remain silent." This isn't going to stay like this," he shouted while being handcuffed. "You don't know who you're messing with. I have friends. I have influence." "Had," the sheriff corrected. "When the news comes out in the papers tomorrow, your friends will line up to deny knowing you." The henchman tried to run, but was surrounded by the other cops. In 5 minutes, the two were inside the cars, heading to jail. Helena broke down crying, still holding hope. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." Connie approached her and hugged her. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm sorry for not having done this sooner." "Why now?" Helena asked. "Because yesterday a young woman came to me in town. She said that she knew who I was, that she needed my help. She said that you had run away, that you were pregnant, that he had tried to kill you." Helena looked at me confused. "What young woman?" The sheriff smiled. "Your cousin, Carol. She said that she always knew the truth but was afraid to speak. When she found out that you had disappeared, she decided to act." "Carol," Helena whispered, "I thought she didn't believe me." "She always believed you. She was just waiting for the right time." Connie took Hope in her arms and smiled at the baby. "And this must be the reason for all of this having happened now." She looked into the child's little eyes. "Sometimes it takes a new life being born for the old justice to finally happen." I stood there, watching everything happen as if it were a dream. In a few hours, I had gone from absolute terror to complete relief. The monster had been defeated, Helena was free, and Hope was going to grow up far from the shadow of evil. "And now?" I asked. Helena looked at me, then looked at the ranch, at the house where we had spent the first days as a strange and makeshift family. "Now," she said, "if you still want us, we'll stay." "Of course I do." And that's how our real journey began. 3 months later, the ranch was unrecognizable. Not because it had changed physically, it was still the same simple house, the same 200 acres, the same trees and fences. But it was full of life in a way that I didn't even remember could exist. Helena recovered quickly from childbirth. In 2 weeks, she was already helping in the garden. In a month, she was taking care of the chickens as if she had been born to it. I discovered that she had good hands for plants. The garden that I could barely keep alive turned into a colorful garden of vegetables and herbs. The tomatoes grew round and red, the lettuces got big and crispy, even the okra that always gave trouble started to produce just fine. "You have a gift for this," I said one morning, seeing her watering the cabbage plants. "My mother taught me," she replied, smiling. "She said that plants know when we really like them." Hope was growing fast too. At 3 months, she already smiled, played with her own little fingers, watched everything around her with those dark and curious eyes. She cried little, slept well, as if she knew she was in a safe place. I learned to change diapers, to warm up a bottle, to make her stop crying just by rocking her in my arms and humming softly, things that I never thought I was going to know how to do in life. At night, when the two were sleeping, I would stay on the porch listening to the sounds of the countryside, crickets singing, wind in the leaves, sometimes an owl or the distant cry of some animal. But it wasn't the heavy silence of before anymore, that silence of loneliness that hurt in my chest. It was a good silence, full of sleeping life, of the tomorrow that was coming. The trial of Colonel Calhoun became news in the newspapers of the region. Sheriff Buckley said that he had rarely seen a case with so much evidence, so many witnesses. Besides Helena and Connie, 4 more women came forward to tell similar stories. Abuse, threats, blackmail, a pattern that had been going on for years. "He's going to get at least 20 years, the sheriff told me when he came to get Helena's statement. "With his age, it's life in prison." Helena received the news in silence. She didn't show joy or relief or anger. She just nodded and went back to what she was doing. "Don't you feel anything?" I asked later. "I do," she replied. "I feel that I can sleep without fear. I feel that my daughter will grow up without knowing that there are real monsters. That's more than enough." Carol, the cousin who had reported everything, came to visit a few times. She was a pretty girl, about 2 years older than Helena, a law student in the capital. She brought some belongings that Helena had left in the colonel's house: clothes, photographs of her mother, some jewels that had belonged to her grandmother. "I kept everything hidden," Carol explained. "I knew that one day you would want these things back." It was moving to see Helena holding the photos of her mother. Marlene was similar to her, the same delicacy in her face, the same blue eyes. In one of the photos, mother and daughter were in the garden of a house, smiling at the camera. Helena must have been about 12 years old, still a child, still innocent. "She was beautiful," I commented. "She was. And brave." Helena ran her finger over the photo with affection. If she were alive, she would have loved to meet her granddaughter. We set up a small altar in the living room with the photos of Marlene and Mary, 2 women who didn't meet in life, but who somehow had met in death to conspire our meeting. At least that's how I like to imagine it. The ranch also started to give better results. With Helena taking care of the garden and helping me with the animals, there was more time to dedicate to the plantation. That year's corn harvest was the best in 5 years. The beans also did well, and I even managed to plant a small patch of cotton that Mary always wanted to try. "You're different," Connie said when she came to visit. She had moved to town after the trial, but came to see us every week. Different how? Younger, more alive. She was right. I felt energy that I hadn't had in years. I woke up early not out of obligation, but out of desire. The days had gained color again, flavor, purpose. And at night, when I lay in bed, I no longer looked at the ceiling thinking about the emptiness of life. I slept the sleep of someone who was tired of doing something that mattered. Not that everything was easy. Helena still had nightmares sometimes, woke up in the middle of the night sweaty and scared. In those moments, I made coffee. We sat in the kitchen and talked softly so as not to wake hope. About the past, about the future, about the fears that we still carried. "Sometimes I think I don't deserve this," she said one of those nights. "What?" "This life, this peace. After everything that happened, after having been dirty for so long." "Helena," I stopped stirring the coffee and looked into her eyes. "You were never dirty. Never. What they did to you doesn't define you. What you are now, what you choose to do from now on, that's what defines you. How can you be so sure? Because I see you every day. I see how you take care of Hope, how you treat the animals, how you make the plants grow. I see a strong, courageous woman, full of love to give. Nothing that happened before changes that." She cried a little, but it was crying of relief, not of sadness. "Thank you, John. Thank you for seeing me like that. That's how you are." Those moments of conversation created a different intimacy between us. It wasn't passion, it wasn't romance, at least not in the beginning. It was deeper than that. It was true companionship. It was knowing that you could count on the other person no matter what happened. But little by little, without us realizing it, it also turned into love. Not a desperate, feverish love like those that appear in movies. It was a calm love, built on routine, on mutual care, on respect. Love of looking to the side during coffee and smiling for no apparent reason. Love of knowing that the other person was there, and that was enough for the world to make sense. The first time we kissed was on a September afternoon when we were repairing the fence of the pasture. Helena was holding the wire and I was hammering the staple when our eyes met. We stood there for a few seconds, just looking at each other, until she took 2 steps in my direction and I did the rest of the way. It was a soft, careful kiss, full of questions that didn't need to be spoken. When we separated, she rested her forehead on mine and sighed. "Is this right?" she asked. "I don't know if it's right," I replied, "but I know it feels good." She laughed, and the sound of her laughter was like music. "It feels really good." We didn't tell anyone at first. It was our secret, our private discovery. We continued sleeping in separate rooms, keeping up appearances, but during the day we exchanged glances, brushed our hands against each other when no one was watching, talked softly in the kitchen when Hope was sleeping. It was Connie who noticed first. "You two are in love," she said out of nowhere one afternoon when she came to visit us. Helena turned red to her ears. I pretended to be busy fixing a broken chair. "There's nothing wrong with that," Connie continued. "In fact, it's beautiful to see two people who have been through so much suffering finding happiness together. We don't want people to think that," Helena began. "That what? That you deserve to be happy?" Connie shook her head. "Honey, after everything you've been through, happiness is more than deserved. It's mandatory." It was that conversation that gave me the courage to make the proposal. On an October night, when it was raining softly outside and Hope was sleeping in the improvised crib that we made with a large drawer, I called Helena to sit on the porch. "I have something to tell you," I said. "Good or bad? Depends on the answer." I took her hand, still small, but now with calluses from honest work. "Helena, I know our story started in the strangest way possible. I know we have complicated pasts, wounds that are still healing. But I also know that in these months I've learned to be happy again. I've learned that life can have meaning, can have color, can have a future. John, let me finish." I smiled at her. "I don't have a ring. I don't have money for a big wedding. I can't promise luxury or trips, but I can promise that I'll take care of you and Hope for the rest of my life. I can promise that you two will never be alone again, never go without again. Never be afraid again." Her eyes filled with tears. "You want to marry me, John? You want us to be a real family?" She didn't answer with words. She just threw herself into my arms and kissed me with longing, with joy, with all the hope in the world. "Is that a yes?" I asked when we managed to separate. "It's a big yes, a huge yes, a gigantic yes," she laughed through her tears. "Then let's get married." And we did get married. At the church in Guthrie, in a small but beautiful ceremony. Carol was the maid of honor. Connie carried Hope in her arms during the ceremony. Sheriff Buckley was the best man because he had kind of saved our family. Helena looked beautiful in a simple white dress with flowers from our own garden in her hair. Hope wore a little yellow dress that Connie had sewn, especially for the occasion. When the priest asked if I took Helena to be my wife, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do us part, my voice came out strong and clear. "I do. With all my heart, I do." And when she said yes too, I felt that the circle had closed, that everything had been worth it, the years of loneliness, the pain of loss, the fears, the uncertainties, everything had led to that moment, to that family that I never even dreamed could exist. Today, a year after the wedding, our life has a good and peaceful routine. Helena takes care of the house, the garden, and the chickens. I work the plantation and the cattle. Hope, who is already over a year old, crawls all over the house, laughs when we play hide and seek, calls us daddy and mommy, without knowing that our story is different from normal. For her, it has always been like this. For her, I have always been the father. Helena has always been the mother, and we have always been a family. Sometimes, when I'm working in the fields and the sun gets too hot, I stop in the shade of a tree and think about how strange life is, how a moment can change everything, how a decision to take a shortcut on any given afternoon can lead you to places you never imagined existed. If I hadn't gone through the woods that day, if I hadn't found Helena surrounded by the monkeys, if I had given up when things got difficult, where would we be now? She would probably be dead. Hope would never have been born, and I would still be alone, empty, living a life that wasn't really life. But that's not how it happened. And today, when I hear the two of them talking in the kitchen, Helena teaching Hope new words, when I see the plants growing green and strong in our garden, when I smell homemade food coming from our house, I know that I'm the richest man in the world. Not rich in money, but rich in what really matters. Rich in family, in love, in purpose. Rich in mornings that make sense and nights that bring peace. Yesterday, Hope took her first steps alone. She came out from near the kitchen table and came toddling towards me, laughing with her arms open. When she got close to me, she threw herself into my arms and gave me a tight hug. "Daddy?" she said clearly. Helena was at the door, watching everything, with a smile that was worth more than all the gold in the world. "Did you see that?" she said. "Our girl is growing up." "Our girl," I repeated, feeling my chest fill with pride and love, because she really is ours. It doesn't matter how it started. It doesn't matter where she came from. Hope is our daughter. I'm her father. Helena is her mother. And we are a family that found each other in the middle of the storm and decided to stay together forever. At night, when the two are already sleeping, I still stay on the porch looking at the stars and thinking about all this. And I always come to the same conclusion. Life isn't about what happens to us. It's about what we do with what happens. It's about the choices we make when everything seems lost. It's about having the courage to take care of those who need it, even when we don't really know how to do it. It's about believing that tomorrow can be different from today. It's about planting hope, even in the driest land, because sometimes in the middle of the storm, life puts in our path exactly what we needed to become whole again. And when that happens, when we find our other half in the most unlikely place, at the most unexpected moment, all that's left for us is to thank and take good care of the miracle we received. Today, when I pass by the trail where I found Helena, I always stop for a few seconds in the same place, not to remember the fear, the pain, the despair of that night, but to give thanks. To give thanks for having had the courage to stop, for having had the strength to help, for having had enough love in my heart to accept two strangers into my life and transform them into my family, and to remember that miracles exist, yes, not in the way we imagine, not coming from heaven with angels and trumpets, but coming from the earth itself, from the cracked ground of life, in the form of broken people who come together and discover that together they can be whole again. That's what I've learned in all these years. Love isn't just that passion from the movies. Sometimes true love is simpler and deeper. It's waking up every day willing to take care of someone. It's looking into a child's eyes and knowing that you would do anything to protect her. It's sitting on the porch with the person you love and not needing to say anything because the silence already says everything. And that family isn't just who was born together. Family is who chooses to stay together. It's who takes care of each other in the bad days, who shares the joy in the good days, who builds small dreams and turns them into great reality. Our family was born from a tragedy, grew in the midst of difficulties, and was strengthened in the love that we decided to have for each other every single day. And that's more than enough. It's more than perfect. It's our life, and I wouldn't change a comma of it. There are encounters that are not chance, but necessity. There are people who come into our lives not to pass by, but to stay. And there are loves that are born not from passion, but from the daily decision to care for, protect, and build something beautiful together. In the end, happiness is not in the grand gestures, but in the small moments that make life worthwhile. And when we find someone willing to share those moments with us, we find everything.